Hey, Aharon Rabinowitz here for School of Motion. Recently, Maxon released a new version of Cinema 4D, and to me, the big standout feature was the Thicken Generator. The Thicken Generator makes it really easy to thicken the geometry of an object in ways that would be hard to do without a ton of work and without some real modeling skills. It's especially great with text, as you'll see, and I love using it with glass materials. So in this video, I'll walk you through how it works and we'll explore some use cases. So let's jump in and see how this tool works. So here I'm in Cinema 4D with a really basic scene. I've got a floor, I've got a light, and I'm using some materials from the pixellab.net, and I'm going to drop in a cube. I'll just drop it in there, and just to make sure that it's actually sitting on the floor itself, I'll use the place tool, which allows me to place it anywhere in 3D space and actually places it touching the object. So here the cube is touching the floor. Now, the thing is, I want to look at how the Thicken tool works, and I think the best way is to actually cut a hole in this object. So I'm going to select my cube, and I'm going to hit C to convert it to an editable object, and then I'm going to use the polygon selection tool right here. So basically the select tool with the polygon tool, and I'm going to click on that, and then I'm going to delete it. So now we have an open cube, and it kind of breaks the illusion of the 3D, because what we have essentially are these super flat, like 2.5D layers that are put together. In After Effects, that's what we'd call it, right? It's completely empty. There's no thickness. There's no depth to it. But the Thicken tool can solve that. So let's go over to here, right here by our generators. And if you go down to where it says Thicken, that will add in the Thicken tool. And from there, we just want to take our cube and drop it in there. And now you can see that there's some thickness that's been added. Let me pull in just a little bit, and let's take a look at this. If we head up to the Thicken Generator and we select it and we go into the Object tab, we can see that it's made up of three parts: the shell, the start cap, and the end cap. Now the shell is the part that bridges the gap between these two places, right? This is what that is. So I'll turn that back on. Now then there's the start cap. Let me pull back again. There's the start cap, which, it's easier if we do this. If we go end cap first, so you can see the end cap is the part on the outside and the start cap is the part on the inside. So if I turn the start cap there, get it back, and it's made up of these three different parts. Now obviously the most important parameter here is the thickness. How thick do you want this? So we can crank that up real high, and look at that. I mean, it's really nice. Like, we don't get any kind of artifacts or anything like that. So that's really great. And you can also decide what direction the thickness is going. Is it going inwardly or outwardly, right? In this case, with the position set to 0, it's going in both ways at 50%. So if we were to change the position to 100, it's in a positive direction. And let's take a look what that means. I'll turn off the Thicken Generator, and you can see basically it's thickening outwardly, right? Again, turn that back on, and it kind of goes out from there. If we set this down to -100, and then we turn off Thicken, we can see that the outer part of the original is now the outer part of the Thicken object, and when we turn Thicken on, it's thickening inward. And at this point, in case you're going to add any modifiers, you may want to add some subdivisions, and for that, you just turn this up, and it'll give us some subdivisions on the thickness. Now, if I were going to try to create something simple like a box, like an actual physical cardboard box, I might lower the thickness down to like 1 centimeter, maybe even 1.5 in this particular object, and I'll apply this cardboard material to the box, and that's already looking good. Yeah. Something important is that once you thicken it, you've actually changed the dimensions of the object. So if you're using the Place in 3D tool, and let me just thicken this up even more so we can really see it. Let me bring the position to 0, and we'll thicken it up to 20. And now it's going through the floor. We can't see that, but it is. If we go under here, there it is. So what we might want to do is use the Place tool again, make sure you have Thicken selected, because you don't want to be moving the cube, you want to be moving the Thicken, right? And so that will get it placed properly on the floor now. So just the very, very bottom is intersecting, which is what happens when you use this tool. And once you've got this going, you can start getting really creative with this. In this case, I've created a gift box. I've used the Thicken Generator on both the box and also the top, so that if it opens, we can animate and see the inside. I've also added in a ribbon from the Cinema 4D asset browser, and that ribbon is really cool because it's got some adjustment ability. And I applied a material that came from Cinema 4D, and then also I'm using wrapping paper from the pixellab.net. And I've even thickened up the ribbon a bit so that it has some dimensionality if we get close. Anyway, if I grab hold of this null, which is controlling the top of the box, and I lift it up, there is a problem there, which we can see is the inside material is using that foil kind of wrapping paper that we've got, and we probably don't want that. So what you can do is select the thicken object that you want to modify, and in this case it's going to be the one for the main box. And what I'll do is go into the selections area, and I'm going to choose Start Cap right here. And this creates a selection tag that will allow me to use that inner surface with different materials. So in this case, I'm going to apply this material, this paper material, right over to the thicken. And then I'm going to, with that material selected, drag this selection tag and drop it right over where it says selection here. And now the inside of the box is using the paper material. So now if I animate this gift opening and there's a present inside, it'll be surrounded by white on the inside and it'll have this nice material on the outside. This is also really useful in creating organic shapes. Like in this case, I've got 3 different splines. I've got a circle and then a flower shape and then a circle. And I can, from here, just add in a loft and drop all of these items inside the loft. And that will create a really hideously ugly vase that I don't recommend you ever make. But yeah, it's pretty basic here. Let me pull in tight. Then with the loft selected, let me just do a couple of things to make this a little better. We'll get some more subdivision going over there. We can also bring up some of these subdivisions. And I'll probably just select the Fong tag to smooth it out, go really high on that. And that helps a lot. But one thing I notice is that there's a cap on top of that. So what I'll do is, with the loft selected again, I'll go over to caps and I'll turn off the start cap. So now we have an empty hole. And of course, I can from here add the thicken tool in. So we'll go to the Thicken Generator, drop this into there. And obviously that's way thicker than I want. So I can set this Thicken Generator to something like, 2. And yeah, now we've got a really ugly vase, or vase if you choose. I'm going to drop that on the Thicken Generator. And why not just add in some roses from the Cinema 4D browser. Double click, bring that in. You can see them inside there. We'll scale that up a little bit. And look at that. And this is why I went into animation and not interior design. As useful as that is with objects like that, I think the place that Thicken really shines is with text, with glass materials, and with a really nice combination of the two. So let's take a look at how this can really help with text. Let me disassemble this scene a little bit here. I don't need the plane in the background for now. I'm going to get rid of these thicken objects. I'll just pull the text out and we'll turn off the thicken objects right here. And I'll even get rid of the materials, and that means also getting rid of our selections here, which we'll come back to. Okay, so I've got some basic text here, and I'm going to add the Thicken tool to it. So let me just do that right now. Let me go to the generators and go to Thicken, and I'm going to drop my text inside of it. And I gotta say, this does such a good job of thickening text in a way that the normal beveling that you might try to do does not. There's so little artifacts. I've seen very little in the way of artifacts here. And what I would say is that if for some reason it's not looking great, sometimes things don't come out straight when you apply it, like maybe this R right here. If I go over to the Thicken and I set it from basic to advanced, that usually solves a lot of the issues as well. So this is really nice. I really like this, and I will definitely be using this to make my text thicker and work with it like that. Okay, now that we've got this text ready to go, I want to use the Thicken tool to thicken only certain areas. And we can use a selection tag similar to what we did before with materials, but here we're going to use it with geometry. So with my text selected, I'm going to go over to selections right here. And I'm going to click on Start Cap. And that creates a selection tag for the cap right here in the front. So with my Thicken selected and going into the Object tag, I'm going to take this selection tag and I'm going to drop it right into the polygon selection. And now what we can see is that the place where we're seeing the thickness is right here on this front piece. So we can really thicken this up if we'd like. So let me make this bigger like that. And you can see how that's working. I don't need it quite that thick, so let me set this maybe to 10 for now. That looks pretty good. And then I want to add another one to the outer tag right here, to this outer side. So I'm going to go back into my text and I'm going to choose from the Selections tab, the shell property right here. And then I'm going to add in another Thicken Generator, and I'm going to take this all and drop it in there like that. And you can see that it's now thickened everything, which again is not what I want. So this is before, this is after. So what I'll do is I'll select this Thicken Generator, and then I want to make sure that I'm grabbing the tag, which is going to be the shell. So that'll be the one that's called S. And I'm going to drag that into the polygon selection. And from there, I can play with the thickness to see what I want to do. So now, essentially what we've done is we've thickened the outer part and we've thickened the front-facing part, but we haven't thickened the bevel area. Also, probably worth selecting that Thicken Generator and setting it also to advanced. Okay, so now I'm just going to apply some materials. Let me choose to apply this bright material to the entire piece of text. Then I'll take this one, which I want to use for the outer shell right here. And with the material selected, I'm going to take the shell selection tag and I'm going to drop it right here into the selection area. And then I'm going to take the same material, drop it onto the text, and do the same thing with the tag. Just drop it right there. Probably want to set it from UV mapping to cubic or something else that will make it look a little bit better. Anyway, then I bring back the lights and the wall that I had before, and I amp up some of the effects, and we've got a nice looking piece of text that would have been very hard to get this neat looking through the traditional methods. And as I pull in really tight, I can see I really like the shape of this text, and it's so clean. Okay, now let's look at an example of using the Thicken Generator on a primitive that has a glass material. And there's a couple other effects going on. Why don't I just remove this glowing material from the sphere in the middle so we can get a better idea of what's going on there. And if you see, it's basically a sphere sitting inside of a platonic that has the Thicken Generator on it. So I'm going to remove the platonic from the Thicken Generator. And we can see how the refraction is working. So if I wanted to create something with thin walls, you know, there is a thing on the materials. You can select it right here and go down to the bottom. There's this thing called thin wall. But when we do this, you don't really get a great result. I never like this. So I'll put that back to the way it was. And with the Thicken Generator, when I drop my platonic into it, it creates these thickened walls. And what's interesting is it's actually less refractive than it was before. Whereas before, without the Thicken Generator on it, you can see it's blowing up the sphere and there's all this like distortion. And here with the Thicken Generator on it, since the walls are actually thinner, it's doing less refraction. Whereas before it was treating it like the entire thing was a piece of glass that this sphere was encased in. Now this is more like a glass case that has geometry that ends right at this point. And from here, I might want to drop all of this into a subdivision surface. So I'll grab that, drop that in there. And I might need to go back to my platonic and add in some more geometry over here. And now we're getting stuff with smoother edges. And of course, if I add my glowing material back onto my sphere, it creates a really nice effect. Now let's look at an example of bringing it together of both the text and the glass. So I've got some 3D text here, and I'm going to apply this glass material, which I got from the Cinema 4D library that ships with it, you know, from the asset browser. And I'm going to drag that onto the text. I did make one change to the material as a whole, and that is if you select the material here and you go down to where it says dispersion, it's under transmission, at 0, you'll get something without color, without chromatic aberration. So I set it to 1. Now this text is cool. It looks really interesting with the glass, but if we add the Thicken Generator, I think we're going to find something that looks a lot better. So let me go down here and grab the Thicken Generator and drop the text into that. And I feel like we get a lot more definition around the text. And take a look here. So we'll pull in tight. We can see, as you look here, that the glass has been thickened just a little bit. And so we get this nice look to it. And I think that we can give this even a little more definition. If I select my thickener here and I set the thickness down to something like 2, you can see that we now have these edges are definitely much more defined. Although I kind of liked it being that distorted, so I'm going to send it back to where it was. And I'm going to try another little trick here. And I'm going to duplicate my text. I'm just going to Control or Command drag it right here. And I'm going to remove this material, right, so we can see that it's just text again. And I'm going to add in an atom array. Right, so come down here and I'll drop the text into the atom array. And here, let me shut off this text so that we can really just look at this atom array stuff right here. Take a look. So the atom array builds like this cool array around the points of the text. So a few things I want to do, which is I don't want to have all of these lines on the side. I really just want to have it right in the front. So I'm going to just lower the depth on the text to 0, and then we can see we've got it back to where this should be. And then I'm going to also, on the atom array, I'm going to lower the sphere radius down to 2. And then I'm going to apply this gold material to the atom array, and then I'll bring my text back. And now we've got this text that sort of had this gold little inlay there. We could push it back slightly into the text if we wanted to. So let me take this text and move it back slightly. I also have this glowing material, this incandescent material that I made. I could also apply that, which is pretty interesting. And then finally, you know, you could actually just use the same glass material and create just an extra layer of glass in there that kind of sticks out. And I'll bring that one forward again, just to give it a little more definition. And now we've got some text that seems very defined, both on the outside and with this thickness inside. Let's look at one last example. This is a little different, this one. I'm going to select the cube. I'm going to apply a thicken by holding Alt and then just clicking on that. And that adds the thickener to it. I can bring it up so we can really see that it's thicker, right? Getting bigger and bigger. And by the way, it's important to note that I have a lot of geometry on this cube, 30 by 30 by 30. I wanted to have a lot so that we could work with this next little bit. So with the cube selected, I'm going to choose Tags, Other Tags, and then the one that's called Vertex Map. And that creates a selection map for the different vertices. And then with the vertex map selected, I'm going to add in a field. Why don't we start with a linear field? That's a good one to work with. And you can see that as the field moves through it, the color of the map changes. So we'll see how this kind of affects things in a moment, but essentially one of these is a selection and the other one is unselected, right? Okay, now let's go back to the Thicken Generator. And you'll see that there's another area here called thickness map. So I'm going to take this map right here and I'm going to drop it right on there. And watch what happens. Now that we've done that, if I move the linear field over it, it gets thicker in the areas that are yellow. So pulling it back like that, I can really raise the thicken value so we can really feel this. And again, just grabbing hold of the linear field, we're controlling the thickness that way. Okay, I know I said that I was done, but after I recorded this tutorial, I ended up making another example, and I thought, hey, why don't I share that with you too? So here I am, and I've got this project. It's actually, it looks really nice, but it's super simple. You know, I'm using an HDRI light, something that came with the Cinema 4D asset browser, and this Snail shell is probably the most interesting thing. This is actually done through a plugin, a really simple plugin from Core 4D, and they have these tools that generate different kinds of primitives that you can then alter, and very inexpensive stuff, and it's really useful. And you can see the snail shell right here. And so this snail shell, I could make it, if I wanted to show you that if I turn off the thicken, you'll already see like what a difference that makes in terms of like how it feels and how much presence it has. So adding the thicken to it really gave it something more than it had before. And you know, you can go in here, and I could have had the snail shell closed, which could have been cool. I can go to 100%, and that looks neat, but I wouldn't have seen the thickening aspect of it, so I wanted to show it at about 50% of where it was at. And if you look here, and we go into display, we can go into the shading with lines. You can see that there's all these controls. If I were to lower the number of segments and lower this number of segments too, so you can see that this is a procedurally generated object that you can alter. And anyway, that's really simple. That's what's going on there. I have a really beautiful iridescent material that I got from the pixellab.net in their imperfect metals collection. So you can see a lot of cool stuff, and I applied that. And the only thing I did to that material was, here, let me open this up. I went into the material and I added in a displacement map, and that's being used to control some of the bumpiness on it. And here, if I just restart this right there, so all these little ridges and all these little bumps you're seeing on the inside, they weren't actually part of the geometry, but this is helping to displace it. And what you do if you want to displace something, because I didn't cover it in this tutorial, is you'd select the object and then you'd go to tags and then rendering tags, and you would use a redshift object. In my case, you might be using a different renderer, in which case you'd have to use one of their displacement tags. But if you add this tag, when you go into the object, you can have it affect the geometry. So you override that, and you tell it to override with displacement and give it a little bit of bump. And that's how that works. And finally, the last touch that you might not realize and see in this shot is that I actually have a layer of water on top of the beach stuff. But because it's displaced, here, let me take a look. If I were going to make this water, let me delete the material that I have here. And it's just really a glass material, essentially. But this layer is flat on top of the other layer that's below it, the sand, but the displacement from the texture is pushing it through. So you get like water that's based on like the height of the sand, so you're seeing it that way. Anyway, it's really subtle, but it really helps it to look more real. And finally, I'm just using a redshift camera here. And if you go into the camera settings, you know, we can look and we can see that we have our optical settings include a bokeh, right, which is depth of field, and I'm using an image, and that's from the Pixel Labs Bokeh Pro. And what that does is it creates chromatic aberration on the edges here as the depth of field takes hold. And so you can see what that looks like. This is what it looks like. And if I were to change to something else, so why don't I just, for just a quick look at this, I can go, they have different maps. These are chromatic with texture. I could go to their maps with just pure texture and no chromatic aberration. So for example, I could drop this one on here, right here into the image for the bokeh. And when I do that, you can see that the chromatics disappear from the lens blur. So yeah, that's the Thicken tool, which I really love in this new version of Cinema 4D, and I hope you guys check it out and find some cool things to do with it. Before I sign off, if you want to learn Cinema 4D, After Effects, and lots of other motion design-y kind of stuff, it's the perfect time because Spring 2023 registration is now open at schoolofmotion.com, so check it out. And if you want some fast, easy tips for creating cool motion design and VFX, stop by my YouTube channel and say hello. As always, I hope that this helps you in your work. Once again, I'm Aharon Rabinowitz for School of Motion. See you soon.